Welcome to our deep dive, and today we're looking into the creation story,
Okay.
specifically chapter 2 of the text. We want to kind of go beyond the usual Adam and Eve stuff and uncover some, I think, pretty fascinating details that you
Yeah.
might not know about.
Yeah,
By the end, you'll have, hopefully, a new perspective on this story
right.
and some new insights.
It's interesting, isn't it, how this chapter starts with God resting
Yeah.
on the seventh day? Not with the first act of creation,
Yeah.
but with the rest. It kind of sets the stage for everything.
It really does. This idea of work and rest, I mean, that's pretty powerful.
Absolutely.
It makes you think, like, how important is rest to you?
Yeah.
Is that something that you think about?
It's definitely something to think about. Moving on
Right.
to the creation itself, there's this phrase that really sticks out.
Okay.
God gave birth to the heavens and the earth.
Wow.
What do you think about that?
That's not the typical language you see.
No.
It's very different.
Some scholars say it's metaphorical,
Right.
highlighting this close and nurturing aspect of creation.
I like that, yeah.
Yeah,
It feels very personal.
exactly. It gives you this image of a creator that's really invested
Mm-hmm.
in what they're making. And speaking of imagery,
Yeah.
the description of the early earth is pretty striking too.
Yeah.
You know, there are no lush gardens,
Right.
no rainfall, just water coming up from the ground.
It's stark,
Yeah,
but it's also kind of beautiful in its own way.
absolutely.
Just this blank canvas,
Mm-hmm.
ready for creation to start.
Exactly. And then
Yeah.
we have man being created
Right.
from dust,
Yeah.
given the breath of life.
Now creating from dust, that's in a lot of old myths, right?
It is.
But what makes this one different?
I think the thing that makes this one different is the intimacy of God breathing life into man directly.
Yeah, it's very direct.
It's not just creating and stepping back, it's this close connection. That elevates the relationship.
Okay, so then we get to the Garden of Eden.
Yes.
It's an amazing place, described as just abundant with trees, pleasing to the eye, good for food. It's just so rich.
Yes, the details are vivid. And the symbolism of gardens, too, adds a whole other layer.
Oh, sure.
Gardens often represent paradise, peace, harmony
Right.
that goes across culture,
Yeah,
across time.
and we can't forget those 4 rivers.
Yes.
Pishon, Gihon,
Right.
Tigris, Euphrates.
So we have the Tigris and Euphrates, which grounds it in geography. But then this mysterious Pishon River
Yeah.
encircling a land of gold.
Is it real?
That's the question.
I know, it's like a hidden layer.
Yeah, is this a real place?
Yeah.
Or is this representing abundance? It's something to think about.
Okay, then we have these 2 really important trees.
Yes.
The tree of life
Mm-hmm.
and the tree of knowledge of good and evil.
Trees are super important in all kinds of mythology.
Okay.
They often represent knowledge, wisdom, the interconnectedness of life.
And God tells Adam,
Yes.
eat from any tree,
Yes.
but not that one.
Don't eat from the tree of knowledge.
Right, and the consequence is death.
Yes.
But what kind of death?
That is the question.
Right.
People have debated that for centuries.
Is it physical death?
Is it spiritual death?
Spiritual?
Something else.
It's complex. It makes you think deeper.
It really does. And then we have this very powerful statement.
Yeah.
It is not good for man to be alone.
Right.
And that leads into the creation of animals,
Mm-hmm.
and Adam gets to name them,
Yes.
which is interesting because it implies a sort of dominion.
It does suggest a kind of stewardship, a responsibility. But even with all these animals,
Yeah,
something's missing.
right.
He's still alone.
And then God creates woman
Yes.
from Adam's rib.
Yes.
And that's a detail that's caused a lot of discussion.
A lot of discussion. It's been interpreted in so many ways.
I bet. What do you think about that choice? Well, some people see it as reinforcing male dominance,
Oh, okay.
but others see it as interdependence.
Okay.
It's interesting, the original Hebrew word for rib can also mean side.
Oh.
So maybe it's more about partnership than subordination.
That's a good point.
So it's not so clear-cut.
That adds a whole other layer.
It does. It emphasizes this profound connection between man and woman.
And then you have Adam's reaction.
Oh, yeah.
Bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh. Powerful.
It really is. And it goes beyond just physical origin, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah.
It's like they're really connected.
Exactly. It's this deep sense of shared identity,
Yeah.
of belonging together.
It's beautiful.
It is. Yeah, it really does highlight that, this unity, this partnership between them. And speaking of unity,
Yeah.
later on it talks about a man leaving his parents and cleaving to his wife, becoming one flesh.
Right.
That same phrase again.
It's interesting. Yeah. What do you see in that? Why repeat it?
Well, it really seems to emphasize how deep that bond is, how exclusive it is, even suggesting that, it supersedes the bond with your parents. It
Hmm.
makes you think, how have things changed
Yeah.
over time, how we view marriage and family.
Totally.
Now, the chapter ends with this really striking image. Adam and his wife were both naked,
Yeah.
and they were not ashamed. How do you interpret that?
Hmm. It's such an interesting image.
Yeah.
It seems like pure innocence,
Mm.
like no self-consciousness at all, no judgment.
Yeah, like a world untouched by sin,
Right.
where shame doesn't exist. It makes you wonder
It
what
does.
that must have been like.
So we've talked about a lot today.
We have.
We talked about this rhythm of work and rest,
Mm-hmm.
the imagery of creation,
Yeah.
the symbolism of gardens and rivers,
Yes.
these mysterious trees, the creation of woman, marriage. It's amazing how many layers there are to this story.
It really speaks to how deep and complex this text is.
Absolutely. And even though we've gone beyond just Adam and Eve,
Mm.
it feels like there's still so much more to explore.
There always is with these ancient stories. They
Yeah.
just offer so many different ways to interpret them.
Well said. Why don't we take a moment to kind of recap?
Okay.
And then I want to leave everyone with a question to think about. What really struck you?
Well, I think the emphasis on divine rest at the beginning, that was powerful.
Yeah.
I mean, even God rested.
Right.
It makes you think about how we live today. How often do we rest?
Totally. Always run around. And then that language of God giving birth to the heavens and the earth.
Right. It challenges us to think differently about
Yes.
how we interpret these things, not just literally.
Yeah. And the creation of woman from Adam's rib. We talked about all the debate around that.
We did.
But ultimately, it comes down to this really deep connection
Yeah.
between man and woman, two becoming one.
Right. And that final image of Adam and Eve,
Yes.
naked and unashamed in the garden, it says so much about innocence.
I know. It makes you kind of long for that.
Maybe.
So for everyone listening,
Yeah.
here's a question for you to think about as you explore this text further. What does this particular telling of the creation story reveal about the relationship between humanity, God, and the natural world? It's a big question.
It is.
No easy answers.
Definitely.
But I think it's worth thinking about.
Yeah, it really does make you think about where we fit in. Are we just caretakers? Are we partners with God in all this? Or is it something totally different? I think this story really makes us ask those questions
Yeah.
and grapple with just how complex it all is and maybe find our own meaning in it.
I like that. And it's funny, we've talked about the garden, the trees, the rivers, but one thing that's really missing from chapter 2 is the serpent.
Oh, that's interesting. You're right. He's not there.
What do you make of that?
I mean, it's pretty significant, right? He shows up later in chapter 3,
Right.
tempting Adam and Eve. So maybe there was something missing in this perfect creation, something that made them vulnerable.
That's a really interesting thought. It's like paradise itself had the seeds of its own downfall.
It's possible. It definitely adds a whole other layer to the story.
It does. So much to think about.
There is.
As we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
we'll leave you with that question. The serpent's absence, does it suggest a vulnerability? Something built into creation itself?
It's a great question to keep in mind as you explore this text. Remember, there are so many layers of meaning here. We encourage you to look for different interpretations, ask those tough questions, and find what resonates with you.
Will said. The journey is just as important as the destination, right?
Absolutely.
Keep exploring, everyone.